Hello guys, second part of Stave 4 today. I'm going to do quite a short one today actually, because it is a shorter stave altogether than some of the others. But the last third, I want to really focus on kind of the last couple of pages. So last time we got to the idea that Scrooge had no power to uncover the sheets that we all assumed and he started to work out was probably his future dead body. And we'd also seen that the spirit, the phantom as it was called, was speechless. It was not talking to him. It was not communicating with him in any other way except he says, "If there is any person in the town who feels emotion caused by this man's death, show that person to me, spirit, I beseech you." Okay? So he says he's sick of seeing people who are not bothered by his death. And he finds it shocking and he finds it traumatic. And he says, can you show me anyone who's affected by this? And the phantom spreads its dark robe and reveals a room by daylight. Okay? Now, think about that as well. The dark robe before him like a wing. Think about the wording there as well. It spread its dark robe before him for a moment like a wing. Supernatural, evil, mystic, satanic thing almost. Yeah? Like a demon. And it shows a room where there's a mother and a child. And we don't really know who these are. And there's a woman walking up and down with anxious eagerness. She's shocked by every sound. She looks to the window, glances at the clock. Think about the long, complex clauses there that are all linked together, all the different things she's doing. Loads of change of focus there. Okay? And we're building this anxiety that she's feeling. Now, finally, the door knocks. And she runs to the door. And it says there was a man who had a remarkable expression on his face, a kind of serious delight of which he felt ashamed and which he struggled to repress. Now, Scrooge has just been asking to be shown someone who is affected emotionally by Scrooge's death. And now we're seeing that there's someone with a kind of serious delight of which he felt ashamed and which he struggled to repress. So his face looks like he's happy about something, but he's ashamed that he's happy about it. And he's finding it hard to keep it down. We can guess what this is. No, eventually he tells her that Scrooge is dead. He is past relenting. He is dead. Yeah? That's a great little quote to know as well. He is dead. It's a really short one as well. It's easy to know. It's easy to revise, for example. So, really good one, that one. Now, then we get a similar thing from the wife. She was a mild and patient creature, but she was thankful in her soul to hear it. Yeah, so the AO3 context point there, that her soul was glad to hear it. Maybe her humanity wasn't, but her soul was. The idea of kind of the afterlife and religion is generally the idea that we're not just made of stuff. We're not just kind of bags of chemicals and bags of flesh, that we are more than that. And obviously in that time, people exclusively believed that, really. And, we see kind of religion coming in. She prayed forgiveness the next moment and was sorry, but the first was the emotion of her heart. So she catches herself. No, I shouldn't be feeling happy about a man's death. This is awful. That's not who I should be. And she prays for forgiveness. But Dickens lets us know that the first emotion she felt, her instinct reaction, her gut reaction, was the one of her heart. That's what she really felt. Now then continues the conversation about where the debt would go, etc. And, they say that it would be real bad luck to find someone who is as merciless a creditor as Scrooge. So basically, don't worry, he's dead. No, surely they can't find anyone as bad as him. And we should be okay to pay our debt by the time they find someone new. Now here's a cracking quote here, look. The only emotion that the ghost could show him caused by the event was one of pleasure. There was no reaction to the death. And anyone who did react, the only emotion that was seen across all of humanity, because the phantom is all powerful and it could, if it was able to find someone who had a sad reaction by it, it would. But the only emotion was one of pleasure. It's very telling for Scrooge. It's a real gut punch, that. Then we see another kind of vague request from Scrooge. Let me see some tenderness connected with a death. Think about that. A death. Doesn't say with my death. It's just he's chosen to word it like that. He's not consciously meant a death. He means his death. But that's the way he words it. And the phantom obliges. Now then, they go through streets familiar to his feet. And they enter Bob Cratchit's house. Foreshadowing, we can probably tell what's coming. Quiet. Very quiet. Now, we've spoken a lot about the traditional, long, complex syntax that Victorian novelists used. And yet, now we're seeing purposeful, minor sentences. Okay? Those really, really short, 1 or 2 word sentences. There's a purpose to it. It's meant to be like that. Quiet. Very quiet. There's also the huge juxtaposition between the previous stave and this stave. Between the present and of Christmas yet to come. Think about how loud, raucous, chaotic, in your face, over the top the Cratchits were before. The kids were running about, and now it's quiet. There's nothing going on. He then hears this phrase, look. And he took a child and set him in the midst of them. It talks about Scrooge had heard these words before. Now that is actually a Bible quote. And basically the story is that, Jesus was, he was kind of preaching to some people, and, in biblical times, even servants had kind of rights over children, and people tried to throw him out, and, Jesus said, no, he should hear it, that he's the lowest class, he's got no power, and the child deserves to hear, even though it's of the lowest class and is a peasant, basically, it deserves to hear it. So a symbol there. Tiny Tim, despite being the lowest kind of common denominator, he was, he was ill, he had disabilities, he was very poor, and he was a child. Even then, he deserves the right to live, to be happy, to be free. We hear that Bob Cratchit has walked slower, but I think he has walked a little slower than he used these last few evenings, Mother. We're starting to infer what's happened. And remember that he used to carry Tiny Tim on his shoulder. And now he's walking slower. Now when Bob arrives home, she hurries out to meet him, and he comes in. And, everyone kind of gathers around him and is glad to see him and talks to him and, tries to cheer him up. And he says that Bob was very cheerful with them, look, and spoke pleasantly to all the family. Bob, as we can infer, has just lost his son, Tiny Tim. Yeah, we can assume that Tiny Tim has died. And yet he's still very cheerful with them and spoke pleasantly to all the family. Even in a really dark time for him, he's trying to be beneficial and kind to other people, even with his emotions. Did Scrooge do that? No, he took it out on other people. He didn't think that, I'm in a bad place, but I'm still going to be nice to other people. Whereas Bob is doing that. We see Bob, he's holding it together, but then he can't hold it anymore. My little child, cried Bob. He broke down all at once. He couldn't help it. If he could have helped it, he and his child would have been farther apart, perhaps, than they were. So there's the idea there that actually him showing emotion brings him closer to Tiny Tim. If he pretended it didn't happen, it sets them further apart. Like Scrooge and Belle, like Scrooge and Fan. Yeah? If he pretends that Fan wasn't a person and didn't exist, it pushes him further away from Fan. And also we're seeing from Fred as well. Because he's refusing to let himself be vulnerable, to be emotional. He goes upstairs, and it was lighted cheerfully, hung with Christmas, and there was a chair set close beside the child, and there were signs of someone having been there lately. So we see a scene, and we see the body of Tiny Tim. And there's a chair sat next to it, where clearly Bob spends a lot of his time. Think about how this room and the way the body is treated is comparable to Scrooge earlier on in this stave. Scrooge's body was covered up, it was cold, it was dark, there was nothing there, things were ripped down, whereas this one is cheerful, it's lit, it's hung with Christmas decorations, he kisses the little face. There is no bigger juxtaposition there than the way that Scrooge was treated compared to Tiny Tim, because Tiny Tim was kind, cared for others. Yeah, again, message for us as readers, not just Scrooge. And to be fair, it's not really for Scrooge, it's for us, because Scrooge does not exist, never did exist. He's a symbol. Now, then we get a part where he has been walking home, and Mr. Scrooge's nephew, so Fred, has seen him in the street, okay? And he says he looked a little down. So he's not distraught, but he's a little down. Now think about why Dickens has chosen to go in this way. Instead of going to Fred's house and referencing Bob walking home, it goes to Bob's house and references Fred walking home. Yeah? Because Bob and Tiny Tim are kind of the real examples of what Scrooge should be learning from the pointed finger. And he doesn't even mention Scrooge. He says, "I am heartily sorry for it, Mr. Cratchit, and heartily sorry for your good wife." So he hears about Tiny Tim, and he passes on his condolences. Now later on, just down the page, he says, "It wasn't for the sake of anything you might be able to do for us, so much as for this kind way. Because Fred offers, if I can help in any way, let me know." And what touches Bob is that he offered. He was kind enough to offer. He didn't want anything material from him. It was just nice to hear that someone had offered and been nice to him and kind. They all say that they'll never forget Tiny Tim, and they all shout, "Never, father," cried they all. Think about the unity there. Yeah, they're all together on the same page. And also, never. You'll never be forgotten. Our little Tiny Tim will stay in our memories forever. Unlike Scrooge, who's already been forgotten by his business friends, and has been forgotten by everyone, really. Emotions speak more than possessions, is kind of the point of this part, especially. Now, I'm going to stop there. There's literally only, just around a page and a bit left of this stave. But I want to do that in a separate one because there's a lot to talk about there. Okay? So, any questions, let me know, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye!